Well, hello, Substance Moms. I'm here with my friend Alicia Fisk, and our theme this year is fully content. And so we're going to be talking a little bit today about what motherhood and life looks like. What kind of grace do we need to receive from God and for ourselves when we find ourselves in this season of discontentment or a season of just being overwhelmed in motherhood? So we're so excited to have Alicia here. She's just going to take a moment to just introduce your family to us, tell us a little bit about your backstory, and also maybe a favorite hobby that you have.
Awesome, thank you. Like Candace said, Alicia Fisk, and I am married to my husband, Matt. We've been married for almost 16 years. We have 6 kids together. Sage is a freshman in high school. Jude is 7th grade. Foreman is 5th grade. We have twin girls, Teal and Tate, and they are 3rd grade. And then we have the trailer baby, Oscar, who is just 10 months old.
I love that.
Yeah.
Those are beautiful names, too.
Oh, thanks.
Love that. If you yourself were just to describe motherhood in just a word or a phrase, what would that be?
Running a marathon. Honestly, that's for me what motherhood is like. It's a long run where you need to pace yourself. For sure. The Bible talks a lot about life being like running, maybe not a marathon, but running a long race. Yeah. The Apostle Paul talks about it in 1 Corinthians as running to win the prize. And then in Hebrews talks about we need to run with friends, with a great cloud of witnesses to cheer us on in that race. And then even in the Old Testament in Isaiah, it talks about running and not growing weary.
Sure. Now, having this picture of just a marathon and comparing it to motherhood, does that mean you've run a marathon yourself?
I have run a marathon. I did not train super well for my marathon. I was during a season of mountain biking, and so I decided that I was going to do that and not run, or at least train. And then I ran the race, and it was difficult. It was very painful. Yes. I felt the best at the beginning of my race, and as the race wore on, especially mile 20, I think every part of my body revolted against me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 2017. I ran a marathon with Paul, and it's brutal on the body. I think I couldn't squat for like 3 months after it was over.
I totally agree. I don't think I could walk for a week.
Yeah.
It was, sorry, you should train. You should try a marathon, but
it's intense. It's very intense. So I think it's a perfect metaphor for motherhood when you're just thinking about, just when you sign up for that race, there's figuring out hydration and training and just how many runs to do a week but the reward is so incredible at the end when you say, I did it, like I finished. And in motherhood, it's intense, but the reward is so beautiful.
It's so worth it.
So let's talk about what is it like to be a mom of 6 and be a family of 8, and maybe what does home life look like for you and your family?
Sure. Being a mom of 6, with 6 kids, life is very full. I love it. I don't want to say it's busy, but it's very full.
Sure.
And currently, what my life situation looks like right now is that we're renting a home, which I know a lot of people do, but we rent from my in-laws, which has been a growth opportunity.
Sure.
I will say that. Definitely a growth opportunity.
And when you say you rent from them, is that you live with them or they own the home and you rent?
They own the home that I live in.
Okay.
And they're wonderful people. They're definitely wonderful people, but it is their home. And so it has caused, I think, some difficulty when it comes to arranging my home or being able to make it what I need it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you are in this season and you're not finding yourself maybe exactly where you thought you would be in your living situation, so how has that affected maybe your contentment, being discontent versus content in your living situation?
Right. And that is something super interesting. My 8-year-old asked me this morning, Mom, what are you talking about? And I said, well, we're talking about being content.
Yeah.
And she asked, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, honestly, honey, I'm learning what that means too. And she went on to kind of just ask some more questions about, does it mean to be happy about the situation? Yeah. Does it mean that you're grateful? And she brought up the hiding place, Corey Ten Boom and Betsy Ten Boom, and they had fleas in their barracks, and how you can be grateful for fleas, but you don't have to like the fleas.
Right.
And so, in this time of contentment or discontentment, particularly on days I struggle, I go on a walk, and I remember vividly this time a couple summers ago, I went on a walk by myself in the woods, really struggling and having a conversation with God about the situation that I'm in. And it was crazy. I walked out of the woods, and I kid you not, all of my neighbors were in their yards, which, every once in a while, a few would be in their yards, but they were in their yards and they stopped me, every one of them, to say, we love your kids, we love your husband, or we even love your dog, and it was in that moment where I knew I'm in my neighborhood for my neighbors and how they need Jesus.
Sure.
I'm not there for me. God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. And he could make a way for us to move, and he hasn't, because he wants us there in that neighborhood.
Sure. Well, that's beautiful. I mean, it sounds like God is really just teaching you some very intentional things in this season where you could easily just be constantly frustrated or just derailed from your purpose there. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's very relatable, I'm sure, for a lot of us. So you have 6 kids, which is phenomenal, and I'm sure just has its daily overwhelm in and of itself. So how do you have this level of grace for yourself in this season of parenting 6 beautiful humans? And what does that look like for you to have grace just on you day to day?
Sure. In life and motherhood, there are so many things that can distract us, and I think being honest with ourselves about that and not trying to idolize what life could be like. I know Pastor Peter talks about that a lot, that expectations or unrealistic expectations set us up for disappointment. And I think if we decide, reframe the pain or reframe our lives, that it's not overwhelming or it's not busy, it's full. My life is full, and it's full of good things, and there are hard things that go with that. But if we focus in on the good, I think that's part of the grace that comes with that. But then not trying to have your life too full. We get to make decisions, and so not trying to pack too much in our days and in our months and in our years. Some of it is just super practical. Like when pizzas are on sale, grab some, put some in your freezer. I know there's no shame in the frozen pizza nights. Nope, not at all, right? Or frozen meals. If I have time, which isn't often, or if I just want to double something and just throw something in the freezer, so when you have those busy days, you can take it out. I always have 5 or 6 Instant Pot or crock pot recipes. Just throw them in. You don't have to think about it. And then get your kids involved. I know now that I have a high schooler, it is a game changer when it comes to making meals or prepping things. It's so great. Have a routine for yourself, but also for your kids. And even with kids, sometimes you do have to remind them every single day that this is what we do. But again, it's worth it. It will pay off eventually. The routine. And then honestly having friends, those deep spiritual connections with people that they have the nudge from the Holy Spirit to text you, to call you, to check in on you, to see how you're doing. And then you do the same thing for them. And it is this great cloud of witnesses that are encouraging us on this race of motherhood.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those, because every single one of those, I think, is something we can easily just not do and just let the day just happen to us. So having those kind of rhythms and routines is so grounding for us as moms. Now, your kids are at all different stages. You've got the infancy, you've got high school, and everything in between. And I would imagine the enemy would just love to lie to you throughout the week or throughout the month and just say you're failing here in this area, or you could be doing so much better in this area. And so how do you just receive that grace from other people in your life, speak the truth in your own spirit, in your life, so that you can keep moving forward with grace?
Sure. I love that you spoke into that, this idea of not being enough or not performing enough. I think it's so real. We all deal with that. And I know for sure the first handful of years of motherhood, my identity, that was a huge deal.
Right.
Who am I? What is my worth and value? And staying in the Word. Pastor Carolyn talks about that all of the time. I don't think you can have enough Bible in your life. You need to stay in the Word. When you're down, go to Psalms. Read even some of the depressing ones. That will bring you right out of your funk, because it always turns around to praise. It really does. Consistent in prayer. Go on a walk. I said that was one of my things, is I can't sit necessarily. I get distracted by the things in the house or the kids, but go on a walk and surround yourself with God's beauty. I think that is so important. And then take those truths that you're reading, and then you're talking with God. And even when you're scrubbing a toilet or you're making a meal or driving kids around, you're serving the Lord, because that's what he said. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, you're supposed to do it to the glory of God. And then I think too, I was going to say this a little bit earlier, but and then connect with your spouse. Honestly, I think we do weekly date nights, regardless of whether or whatever it is, whatever stage our kids were in. We made it a priority to connect with one another, because that is, honestly, I think it should be a spiritual discipline. If it's not, is connecting with your spouse. There's so much strength when you are praying with and spending time with your spouse.
I love that you mentioned nature, just to get outside, because I remember going through motherhood a few years back, and it was so intense with our youngest, and nature became the sanctuary for me. And it sounds like it still is. And just your small group, you have the 4 to 7 that you get together with, and you guys mountain bike on Saturdays. So how do you specifically receive grace from these friends, these people that are just in your life on a regular basis?
Sure. Sometimes it's super practical, receiving the grace. When I went through, a couple of years ago, I went through a miscarriage at 20 weeks. And this was the year that Substance canceled Christmas, one of their services on that Wednesday. I don't know if you remember, but she packed up her 4 kids in her car, drove over an hour to my house, dropped off meals, cried with me for 5 minutes, and then got back in her car and went home. I had another friend, like the next day, did the same thing. And it's in those times where, when you have those people in your life that know the things, they can empathize with you, they pour in grace. They also can say some things that maybe are a little ouchy, right? They can say that, I think you need to pull up your big girl pants, Alicia, and maybe try this. And they have some practical wisdom too, things that have worked for them. And that's how you can receive grace. They're there to just pour into you both some of the good and some of the hard things that we need to hear in life.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We could have this cheer section over here in life, but you got to have the people that are calling things out and seeing patterns that could be destructive, and saying, hey, you sound not just that you need a vent session, but you seem so disgruntled. Let's talk about that. Like let's get you to a place of gratitude, or just a place where life is always going to throw stuff at you, how can we walk in grace in those really stressful, overwhelming seasons? So
Right.
If you were to leave our moms today with just this thought or phrase, to sum up our time today, what would you want them to know? What would you want to leave them with?
Sure. When you find yourself in a seemingly uncontrollable situation, which is every day, there is something that is uncontrollable. We are not in control. How do we respond? I think as Christians, we have this idea that in a life of contentedness, we're happy about everything, or the way we see different hard things, somehow it's better or easier, and it's not. If anything, when God finds us faithful, there are more hard things, and they're still hard. They're like the fleas in Corrie ten Boom's life, and they still bite, and they're still uncomfortable. But how do we respond? Do we understand that God has this for His good? And I am honored to be a part of that calling. Right. I think that is something that when we renew our minds, we allow the Holy Spirit to come in and guide us. He changes the patterns of our thoughts, that we can think about things in a different way. Still hard, and it's still like just running a marathon. All the body parts hurt. But we understand that when our eyes are fixed on Jesus, it is for the joy set before us. That we are running this race, that we can choose to see the hard and reframe it in the light of eternity. Honestly, whether it's in motherhood, or it's in friends, or if it's in our housing situations, or if it's in groceries or jobs, or whatever we might find ourselves in, that we can refocus our minds and allow the truth really to take over instead of the lies.
Yeah. Oh, wow. This has been so beautiful to get to just spend this time with you this morning. I think everything you said was so relatable for our moms. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. You shared some heavy things with us today, but these aren't empty words. These words are going to fall, I believe, on these women's hearts, these mamas' hearts. And I think we all just need that reminder that we can easily be derailed with the daily overwhelm of life, but the gratefulness, the grace, receiving that and receiving it from other people, for ourselves, from the Lord, is so powerful. And there's a scripture we want to leave you with today. It's in Hebrews. It's chapter 4, verse 16. And it says, "Let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God." And when we're there, when we come boldly to that throne, when we are there, it says that we will receive his mercy and we will find his grace when we need it the most. And I think it's so easy for us to isolate ourselves, to just turn inward when things get really hard, and when we find the discontentment growing and brewing and festering, and when we can just stop and say, all right, Lord, I'm going to come boldly to you. I'm going to come to the throne of grace because you gave us two promises. You have promised all of us that we can receive grace and we can find your mercy, receive mercy, and find your grace. So recognize the rhythms and routines that you need to thrive. I think Alicia shared some beautiful examples of that in our interview. And so recognize what those are, those things that really ground you. Receive that grace from your community. Go to your community. Be vulnerable with them. Let a mama drive an hour and bring you food and cry with you for 5 minutes. It's easy to turn people away and say, no, I'm good, but let them do that for you. Be open. And then finally, go boldly to the Lord. If you're sitting there and something is just stirring in your heart and you either don't know if you want to cry or punch a pillow right now, just know that the Lord, he's ready. He's like, hey, come, I've got these beautiful promises for you of my grace and my mercy, and I want to help you. And so we love you, ladies. Thank you so much for just taking time to be with your gather group today. It's a beautiful step that you've taken, and just take it a step further. Just think about the scriptures that were shared this morning, Alicia's experiences, and just pray that the Lord would give you the grace you need to continue forward. Have a wonderful day.